All right, everybody. Welcome to Go Wellness Radio and to a phenomenal show today. I've got Warren Osborn, and he's going to be talking about ALS and kind of his journey of it. I think you'll find him incredibly inspiring. Not only is he on a mission to cure and end ALS, but he's also on a mission to really solve the biggest challenge that I think he's ever faced in his life, which is ALS. So, Warren, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And so what was it like, you were diagnosed with ALS. How long ago were you diagnosed, and what was that like for you?
I was diagnosed May 10th of 2018, and it was the shock of a lifetime. I had been having fasciculations in the muscles throughout my upper body for several months earlier, since actually November of 2017. But didn't get the full diagnosis until May 10th, 2018. Kind of thought it was likely ALS a few months earlier than that, kind of the self-diagnosis, but by the time I actually got to a ALS neurologist, was May 10th of 2018. And it was mind-blowing to be told you have 1.5 to 3.5 years to live. And if that's 90% of the people live that long, it's actually 2 to 4 years, but it was already 6 months since the big symptoms occurred. So it was pretty mind blowing and difficult here. And also to find out there was only 2 drugs available, 2 treatments that are authorized for ALS. One gives you up to 2 months of additional life. One gives you up to 3 months of additional life. That assumes you're willing to be on a ventilator and breathing tube and feeding tube and all that. So that's all the options they have for ALS that are official.
Right. Wow. So talk about rocking your world, because what was life like, before you were diagnosed? What were you up to? I know you're a serial entrepreneur. You've launched incredible businesses throughout your career, but what were you doing at the time?
Just running another company. I'd recently just started another business with my son, the 11th company I've founded, and was just running it, and life was going good, and then all of a sudden this starts happening. I was experiencing some atrophy and cramps for maybe a year longer than the fasciculation started. But, just really, really busy, active, running a company. Mm-hmm. But after I got ALS and I quit running the company and put my full-time efforts on working towards a cure for ALS.
Beautiful. And so your mindset, when you were diagnosed, obviously there's some grief and loss. There's just it shocked your world, but how did you get that shift between hey, this is, I'm going to just throw in the towel and I'm going to let my diagnosis define me. How did you have that mindset shift where you said, you know what, I'm going to tackle this problem? What is that?
I'm a very determined fighter kind of personality, launching businesses and running companies. It's all about problem solving. And so with this, I kind of took it the same way. And I've just got to go solve all the problems. And so I started researching all the different treatments that are in clinical trials and all the different supplements that have helped people live longer and do better, and quickly developed a protocol that was pretty intense. So I was taking over 50 supplements twice a day. For most of the last year. I'm now down to only 40 something twice a day.
Only?
Yeah. But every one of those goes back to researching and someone doing better with that supplement, or that
right.
supplement appearing to be good for helping autoimmune disorders or brain health. But the stem cells have been, I think, the biggest thing.
Okay.
There's clinical trials that are showing really strong benefit with ALS. The Brainstorm trial with a product called Neurone has been through, phase 2 clinical trials, and it's showing significant benefit and even short-term reversal of symptoms by using bone marrow-derived stem cells. So I mimicked that clinical trial and did so out of the country, because you cannot legally do it in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I went out of the country to Guadalajara, Mexico, to do that stem cell treatment. And I did that every month for 4 months in a row, starting last August, doing the bone marrow extracted stem cells. These are called autologous stem cells, and injected intrathecally, but then improved upon the treatment by also injecting it through the carotid artery,
right
through the carotid artery, and did that 2 months, and then continued doing the intrathecal injections every month for 4 months, and experienced a reversal in lost strength. Previous to that, I had lost, between January and July of 2018, I had lost 20 to 30% of my upper body strength over just that 6-month period of time. But after starting the stem cells and doing the stem cells for a few months, that strength started to come back, and I regained all of the lost strength. Simultaneously, I also was doing stem cells with you at East West Health, doing cord stem cells, and did those intranasally, through the muscles, and also by IV. So I was hitting it with both types of stem cells every month.
Man.
And I've been really improving a lot. Statistically, I should already be in a wheelchair or able to talk, and I can still do everything. I play tennis, play golf, still ski, fully active. So it hasn't really taken anything out of my lifestyle, and I've regained the lost strength after doing stem cells. Now, I've done a lot of treatments, 32 different stem cell treatments over the course of a year now.
Man, yeah, because you look, we're in August now of 2019, diagnosed in May of 2018. And so you've really hit it hard. I mean, there's a big breakthrough. I mean, you went to China and you've actually had fetal stem cells, which, many of us, we'd say, well, man, with these embryonic stem cells or fetal stem cells, how did you get to the place where you said, okay, I'm just going to trust that it's safe enough, and I'm going to go for it with those types of stem cells? What was the process like for you?
So, well, I've done business with China for 30 plus years now. I've been over there like 110 times, and I speak the language, and so that was helpful.
Yeah.
But found a center over there, the Wu Medical Center, and did fetal stem cells there just a month and a half ago. And that's 3 different treatments injected intrathecally. And I'm pretty bullish on those stem cells, because those stem cells, I think, have more of a design to grow brain tissue and neuro tissue than a bone marrow stem cells. Probably don't have as many neuroprotective neuro type of cells. So I'm pretty bullish on that. I just did that a month and a half ago. I'm going again on the 9th this month to do stem cells again, but I'm going to a different hospital this time.
Yeah. Why are you going to a different hospital?
Because the one I'm going to now, I visited when I was there last time, and they're just a nicer hospital, much more modern and high-end, like a U.S. hospital. And they also extract the stem cells themselves a week before going there, where the other clinic is using cells from a bank. And so they're fresher, and the hospital's nicer. So I'm going again to do them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, we've always looked at that when we use with the umbilical cords. I mean, it's a 15-minute ride from the time the mother gives birth to the lab, and then the lab processes it. gets crab preserved, and they have a 90-day window where those get released. There's other labs out there who they'll keep it in its crab preserved state for up to 3 years. And so I'm a firm believer of that. So I'm excited to see how your next treatment goes.
I'm excited about that too. I'm a believer that fresh is a little better than growing them 5, 10, 50 times over.
Yep.
I think there's also some growth factor in other cells that don't survive the processing that are there when it's fresh. So I'm looking forward to doing that treatment here literally in a week. I head out. There's 4 other ALS patients that are going with me over there to China to do this treatment.
You've kind of emerged as somewhat of a leader in the ALS community. People, in the ALS community have nowhere to turn, but what are you doing, and how can people who have ALS actually learn more about you and maybe start following you on Facebook and things like that?
Well, I've been fortunate because the stem cell treatments have been beneficial for me. I'm not sure everybody in the clinical trials with stem cells are doing as well, but most are showing significant, at least short-term improvement. I personally don't believe that it is yet a cure.
Right.
There's no data in clinical trials showing a permanent fix, a cure yet. My hope is that if we're using multiple different types of stem cells, that we can get closer to a cure than if we're just using one type of stem cells. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing all 3 different types of stem cells: bone marrow derived, cord stem cells, and fetal stem cells. And also looking at possibly in the future doing adipose tissue stem cells derived from fat.
Yeah.
And also looking at potentially doing amniotic epithelial stem cells from the amniotic sac.
Yep.
But anyway, I'm just fortunate because it's been working for me, and I haven't lost any more strength now in all these several months. I continued to atrophy in my left arm. I've lost just in the last few months, I've lost another inch in diameter in that tricep. It's still withering away, but that doesn't mean the motor neuron death is continuing. That could be just the atrophy from the motor neuron death that was already in place. So we really don't know. We don't have any way to know for sure whether motor neuron death has stopped or whether it's just gone really, really slow due to all the stem cell treatments that I'm doing. But I've done a lot now. 32 treatments in a year is probably a world record for an ALS.
I thought I'd done a lot. I've done 14 in 7 years, so I'm not even close.
Well, and I've done a lot of treatments with your clinic, and they've been great. I haven't repeated the nasal cavity, excluding with you. We've done 3 times with you, and the thesis there is really strong. I think some of those stem cells may pass the blood-brain barrier and you can get to the brain. So
yeah, and the neuropeptides there. And have you started on the peptide treatment yet?
I don't think so.
Because we got you the prescription last time we were in, and so you should be getting it. It will show up at your house anytime. So that will be the other layer that I think will give you a nice little boost. Because we look at ALS, and one of the things you and I talked about is, yes, we got to help the people who already have ALS. But the other thing I'm looking at is what could we do to prevent ALS and some of the causative factors. You mentioned some of the blue-green algae, and maybe you could talk a little bit about causative factors and what you've seen there, or spinal injuries.
Yeah, clearly there's many things that are correlated and connected with ALS, including blue-green algae. There's a neurotoxin in blue-green algae that is definitely triggering and enhancing or exacerbating ALS. Head injuries and head trauma are clearly also a factor. Football players, for example, get ALS at a rate of like 300% of non-football players.
Yeah.
So definitely spine injuries, extreme athletes all get ALS at a much higher rate. So clearly there's a connection with damaging the spinal cord or the brain with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at least 95% of the ALS people I know, which are hundreds now, have either been an extreme athlete, like running marathons, a really intense athlete, or they've had a serious head trauma, concussion, or a serious neck injury, or a surgery in those areas. And I did as well. I personally think my trigger was 5 years ago, having a skiing accident, breaking this collarbone and 15 rib breaks. And I had 4 surgeries on this collarbone. And I think that was kind of the trigger. And then I think all these different triggers are coupled with genetic weakness. Only 10% of ALS people have what's called familial ALS, which is definitely connected to a defective gene. But I think even the sporadic ALS patients, which make up 90%, also have a genetic weakness in the majority of it. I found a defective gene that I have called TRP4, was just discovered, and I did a genetic testing last September, October of 2018, and found this defective gene that's in the past been associated with spinal muscular atrophy. But just on December 16th of last year, this gene now has been associated with ALS officially.
Yeah, because you were the one that kind of pushed that knowledge forward, because the doctors you were working with at the time, they said, no, this TRP4 gene is not related. There's no correlation to ALS. But how did you get them to actually acknowledge it?
Well, it was actually the CEO of New Amsterdam Genomics. I had a call with him and with my doctor, and we visited about it. And at that point in time, there was no material out on the TRP4 gene, but it stood out to me because I had it, because I have spinal issues and muscular atrophy. And so it looked, it matched my symptoms. And so when we researched that gene further, we found that it was literally the first time associated with ALS, December 16th of last year. So I found it right after it being connected to ALS. But we have different levels of defectiveness in our genes.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I have a gene that's now connected with ALS, but I think some are maybe 90% genetic, and others maybe only 10-20% genetic. And so mine, we don't know for sure, but I definitely have a gene that's connected with ALS, and I definitely have had a lot of the triggers that spark it. So.
The surgeries on your collarbone and neck, significant.
Yeah.
And so the blue-green algae, have you seen studies on the blue-green algae? I know there's a population, I believe it's in Guam, where they have a lot more of the density of the blue-green algae, and they have a much higher incidence of ALS.
And ALS in Guam, they have 100 times the rate of ALS.
Wow.
And it's that was the thing that kind of got the scientists to find it. Paul Cox actually was the major discoverer of that driver. But there in Guam, the indigenous people eat the bats, and the bats are eating the algae, and so they're getting exposed to the algae that way. And that's where the blue-green algae comes in. So this is one of the reasons why I don't eat shrimp or seafood anymore, because the shrimp may have eaten the blue-green algae when they're in a fresh lake. So I don't eat any seafood anymore.
Got it. No seafood at all.
No, and the ocean fish have too much mercury and heavy metals in them, and that's also extremely toxic.
Yeah. So,
and then the fresh fish have the risk of the blue-green algae being in the shrimp. I mean, if you knew 100% sure that the seafood had no exposure to blue-green algae, then I'd eat it, but you have no way of knowing, if it has any blue-green algae in it. It's definitely toxic to motor neurons, and it's also shown to be a trigger for Parkinson's.
Yeah. Have you looked at some of the neurotoxins that, have been found like in diet sodas, aspartame, for example, or have you seen any correlation with ALS and those?
I haven't seen a correlation there yet with that.
Okay. Yeah, it might be an interest. That's one of the things we certainly talk about, getting rid of any artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, neurotoxins. And so,
yeah, I think all the artificial stuff is pretty unhealthy. And because of this, I eat an extremely healthy diet. I went vegan for 9 months after getting ALS, but I had a hard time keeping my muscle weight on, being 100% vegan. So I started eating beef and eggs, organic beef and eggs again, but I don't eat any other animal products, and I don't eat any processed foods because of all the crap that's in them.
Yeah. And so we look at some of the causative factors, and diet's going to be a huge thing, especially to keep because you're a high active individual, high energy, you're on the go all the time. And so you've got to fuel your body right. And what would you say, like, as far as a regulatory perspective, what do you think is holding us back in the United States from actually making progress on ALS? Because you and I we spoke earlier about the money that goes into research and what we're actually getting, as far as an outcome goes. But what do you think is holding us back?
Well, the biggest problem is it takes 10 to 12 years to go through all clinical trials to even test a drug. And then if they're going through the process, let's say for bone marrow derived stem cells, if you get halfway through that process and the scientists discover an improvement, they got to start back over. And so they don't even want to, it kind of prohibits you from improving on the process as you're doing the process, because you have to go through phase 1 and get safety and efficacy, then move to phase 2, and then a larger trial with phase 3. And if that's a 10 to 12 year period of time, you get halfway through and the scientists learn a better way to do it, they got to start all over again.
Right.
So that's a huge weakness in the system. The other thing is the FDA shouldn't require going through all 3 phases before they allow administration of these treatments.
Uh-huh.
So with the product called Neurone from Brainstorm, phase 1 shows it's safe. Phase 2 showed 36 out of 36 people all showed functional improvement.
Wow.
So they should allow that to be treated immediately then. Instead, they're just letting everybody die because there's a treatment hasn't gone through all 3 phases yet. And so in the meantime, everyone's dying before they can get this thing out to market. So I think they're just working on 50-year-old rules that are extremely slow, and I think they need to allow the right to try law should be an enforced law. Mm-hmm. That for terminally ill patients, once they're through a phase 1 and that shows safety, they should allow people to use that drug or concoction. Right now there's 3 significant treatments out there for ALS that are in clinical trials that nobody has access to unless you get invited into the trial. Then you got like a 50-50 chance of placebo. And all 3 of those should be delivered to people now, immediately, because they're dying otherwise. So what I do is I'm basically mimicking these trials out of the country because it's illegal to do in the US, which is a shame. We have the most advanced science probably in the world here, but we aren't the most advanced in administrating of the science because our laws are way, way, way too restrictive.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people in the research arenas with stem cell therapy, they say, we've got to quit treating these biological agents like a drug. And so we're taking them down the same pathway, but biology is so complex anyways. Like if you know it's safe and it shows efficacy, I'm with you. We've got to start fast flowing it.
Absolutely. The other thing they don't allow, which is a huge mistake, they don't allow a cocktail approach.
Mm-hmm.
So now I respect the double-blind trial to isolate a single thing and to prove whether it has true efficacy on the average.
Yep.
I respect that logic, but that assumes that one ingredient or one drug or one treatment will fix. What if it takes 2 or 3 or 4 things? Think about baking a cake. What if you use one ingredient to bake a cake? What do you get?
Nothing. You get that ingredient. Yeah.
You get the garbage, right? Well, I think that the combination of diet, health, supplementation, and 3 different types of stem cells is likely better and more therapeutic for my reversal that I've experienced now for a year than if I was just doing any one of those things. If I was doing one of those things, I give it a 99% chance I'd be way worse off today. So I'm a bigger believer of the cocktail approach. Well, there's no process that I'm aware of with the FDA regulatory rules to actually try a cocktail approach. Could we try carotid artery injection plus intrathecal injection plus nasal injection and do this with 3 different types of stem cells all at the same time? That might just be the cocktail that works.
Yeah, but you just turn science upside down. Come on, we need one agent. We want to reduce it down to that one thing.
Yeah.
And it's never one thing.
One thing might not work. Look at HIV. You know, that wasn't one thing that cured that. And I think with ALS, it is unlikely that just one treatment or one drug is actually going to cure it. And we don't know whether what I'm doing is actually going to cure mine or not, but we do know that it has at least dramatically slowed things down.
Yes.
So I'm not going to stop. I will continue doing stem cell treatments very, very regularly, like almost monthly, at least every other month.
Yeah, which I think is brilliant. I mean, we've worked with about a dozen ALS patients. And, you know, we can slow the progression somewhat, in some cases stall it out. But you with doing the cocktail, I'd have to say, just from my clinical observation, you definitely have done a lot better than the other ALS patients we've worked with as far as getting, you know, staying active. You don't have, you're not using a walker, you're not using a cane. You can talk clearly, your brain's on fire, you're working, you know, you're really onto something big. So I agree.
Well, I've had 1.7 billion stem cells injected in a year. And then I just started a phase 1 clinical trial a couple weeks ago and had 1.3 billion plus or minus 100 million cord blood cells injected in. That was all IV. That's a phase 1, so it's really early.
Yeah.
The science of it is pretty strong. And you think of the cord cells, that's where life begins.
Right.
That's where our brains are growing, our tissues are forming. And so I'm pretty bullish on anything that is derived from a cord. And so that's why I went ahead and did this. I'm the first ALS patient in that trial for cord blood, and I'm doing it again at the end of September. So I don't see it could be, the risk of causing harm is teeny. When you have a terminal illness, that risk is little, very, very, very little.
Yeah, the risk of doing nothing is so much greater than the risk of you know, stem cell therapy.
Maybe 10,000 times greater.
Yeah.
Way, way, way greater. Stem cell treatments have shown so low of rates for bad negative outcomes that it's hardly even worth considering it being that risky.
Yeah.
Taking the drugs that are available for ALS to me is a way higher risk and way more negative side effects than any stem cell treatment that I'm playing with.
Well, especially when you know at the end result, the drugs at best maybe you'll buy a couple extra months of life, not really enhancing your quality of life that much. It's like, yeah, it's a much bigger risk. So
I actually tried the one pill form drug, and it made me just kind of feel yuckish, not really great. And a lot of other ALS patients don't feel super great on it. So I quit it after 8 to 10 days. And then I was approved for the IV drug, which is $148,000 a year. And my insurance actually would have paid that, but I didn't do it. There's just not enough science that shows it's beneficial enough, not enough upside. So literally everything I'm doing is speculative and tracking and mimicking clinical trials. It's nothing's been proven with ALS yet to cure, but there's a lot of things that are showing good promise, going in the right direction, and I'm just cocktailing all of it together into one big, huge brew.
yeah. You're the witch of the ALS world, just concocting. Well, I
Also
mean,
the guinea pig, yeah.
the guinea pig. Yeah. The beautiful thing about it though is I look at health. I've never seen it isolated down to one narrow thing. And so I always looked at patients and I've said, even if we're treating someone's knee for osteoarthritis, I said, yeah, the stem cell treatments are going to be just a tiny fraction of what we're doing. We gotta reverse all the trends in your body that are going to contribute to inflammation.
Oh
And
yeah.
ALS is no different. Shoulder injury is no different. Diabetes is no different. Like it's really the whole approach.
You pointed on something with you said inflammation, and that's a big thing. Several of the supplements I take, like curcumin, it's basically an inflammation enhancement.
Yeah.
And a lot of the benefit, I think, with bone marrow derived stem cells is inflammation. It's one of the reasons why I think some people get so much improvement for a few months is because it takes away the inflammation. And so
Yeah.
some of that damaged tissue that's in the process of dying but it's not dead loses its inflammation and recovers somewhat.
Yeah.
But I think that's a big thing. It's one of the reasons why I don't eat hardly any sugar. I cheat a little bit, have a little bit of dark chocolate, maybe cheat once a month with something a little sweet, but
Mhm.
it's about reducing inflammation.
Right.
And stem cells are all but proven to be highly effective in reducing inflammation.
Yeah, I think we isolated like 30 years ago that stem cells turn off two chronic markers. They turn off your tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin 6, and so those are drivers. Those are chronic inflammatory drivers. And I don't know why we can't just say, okay, well, stem cells have this metabolic function. Therefore, virtually every chronic disease you can look at, neurodegenerative or other autoimmune diseases, are driven by these two immune markers. Why, or inflammatory markers? Why aren't we just using stem cells as that function alone and just like get away from all this testing and just say, here, the pathway's open. If they've got these markers elevated, use this treatment.
Yeah, agreed. As a side note, I had a hip that the doctors, orthopedic surgeons wanted to do surgery on, do a hip replacement 2.5 years ago. And it was really painful, inflamed, and wasn't looking good. And literally 2 different orthopedic surgeons were ready to schedule a hip replacement there. And I decided to wait, didn't do it, had stem cells injected in there at your clinic. And I have had no pain in that hip in the last year.
Nice.
And I also, your clinic did injections in my shoulder and in my neck, and all my shoulder pain went away as well. So I've had arthritis pain in multiple of the joints, and that's been a very nice side benefit of having the stem cell treatments is all my arthritis pain has gone away.
Good. Yeah,
It's
because
something I didn't replace the darn hip, because I'd be a lot worse off with a hip replacement today. And all you guys did was one injection in this hip, and the pain went completely away. I can go ski for 8 hours a day, and I'm pain-free.
crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, we see that every day, but yet how many people are getting hip replacements and they have no idea this exists, or they just literally will not do anything their insurance won't cover. And so I think, you mentioned this in the clinic the other day. You said, look, I've spent thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands, I'm sure at this point, on my health, and my insurance has paid $0 of that.
Actually, they paid a few $100s for a couple drugs that the doctor prescribed. But for the hundreds of thousands of dollars of stem cell treatments, they haven't paid a dollar.
Right.
Not a dime.
And it's literally the thing that's keeping you alive, which is.
Yeah, what's keeping me alive, my insurance doesn't pay anything for.
Yeah, and not just alive. I mean, for those of you who've never met Warren in person, some of you will watch our YouTube videos, some are listening to the podcast, but he's a very vibrant individual. He's healthy, he's fit, he's got strength. I mean, it's impressive to see that you wouldn't think that there's any ALS diagnosis, which is.
But you forgot about the atrophy and the fasciculations. My whole body is just going.
You can see some of that, yes.
Because there's a lot of motor neuron death, and unfortunately, we just measured my arm this morning again, and I've lost about an inch in the last inch in the diameter on this tricep. Tricep's by far the worst place it hit. But my right side, which was atrophying, has not atrophied anymore. It's only the left side that's atrophying.
Good.
And I have some atrophy in my pecs and my shoulders and my back.
Yeah.
But that seems to be maintaining. The only place that seems to be progressing still is where I had the worst atrophy, where it started is in this left tricep right here. It's just see this big flab here.
Now, have you had that injected directly into that area, Warren?
Yes, I've had probably 4 different injections of cord stem cells there, 50 to 70 million per injection.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's helped or not, but it certainly can't hurt.
Right. Yeah.
The only thing that hurts about it is a little tiny poke when the needle goes in. That's not bad.
Not bad at all.
Not bad.
So what's your next adventure? I mean, you love skiing, heli-skiing. I mean, you're still out there. What's your next big adventure?
Well, I am going on a boat yacht with a friend up in Canada in about a month and a half, and I'm also going on a European cruise. And then I'm just signing up in the next week to do a 5-day heli-skiing up in Canada again next year. That's basically mentally saying I'm going to be healthy enough to be heli-skiing in next February.
Love it.
That takes a lot of strength and energy to do that, because you're skiing 5 days in a row from morning till late afternoon, and the helicopter takes you right to the top of the super high mountains, and you ski down and get back up in a few minutes. But I'm bullish, and if I keep progressing it the same way I am right now, I'm sure I'll be able to do that next February.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the snow in British Columbia is heavy and deep. So
yeah, it's a lot heavier than it is in Utah. So
yeah, our Utah snow, I was like, oh, this is a breeze. After I skied British Columbia, it's easy up there. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, it's been great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. Appreciate the inspiration. And how can people get in touch with you, Warren? If there's someone who has ALS and they want to just see what you're up to, do you have like a Facebook page or a way that people could contact you?
Yeah, people can connect with me on Facebook. Yeah, so Facebook Messenger is good.
Warren Osborn, is that what they find it under?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my name.
Well, there you have it, the famous Warren Osborn, and I really appreciate you being on the show, and look forward to lots of future interactions, and looking forward to getting you back on the show in about a year and seeing how you're doing.
All right. Thank you.
You got it.
Bye.